Hi, welcome to Introduction to Unit Test in Python. We are using PyCharm as the editor in choice. And then I just want to go over how to set up both a modular program and also testing of the modules. So here we go. And then let's see, I'll just go ahead and down there. And it just is interesting. So then we have here three modules: phone book, PC, which is the modules that we have written to actually do the work; test phone book, which then goes ahead and tests the various functions that we have in phone book; and also use phone book. So then if we go to use phone book, notice that all of them have a header with the purpose and information, so that all your code should have this information of some type here, which includes a general description of the program, then your name, the date it's being written, and then also the purpose for this particular module. And as you go through, then if you do any updates, then you usually do a modified and then give a date and then what you're doing to modify. This will happen as you get into more professional programming. So here we go with the code. We have three functions in phone book. First of all, we set up parallel arrays or lists called names and numbers, where names are for anybody you want to add to your phone book, and numbers are for their phone numbers. So then we do have a function here to add name with name and number. And then we just automatically set getVal to true. Now, if we have a problem in appending either the name or the number to the lists, then it will fail the try and come down here and return a false. Then if you notice, getVal stands for return value. And this is something I always do if I want to return value, set it up to begin with, and then modify it anywhere along the line that would make sense. For example, I just assume it's going to be true, and I'm going to assume that the tries will work. But if the tries do not work, then the except will be triggered, and getVal will be changed to false. The second one is print names, which goes through, and what it does is it just returns the value of all the names in the phone book, separated by a new line, which is represented by a \n. And I just had here the print format, and then just went ahead and just to show you what was being printed. And then I didn't need any more, so I put a £sign in front of it. So if I needed it for any more testing, I could put it back in by just removing the £sign. Then the last one I have here, and probably then I should have in here then a description of what each one does. So for example, this one is then return the number of a given name if name not in list, return 0. And it's always good to have a description of each of these. I don't have on the other one. I should, but I won't add them at this point. So then the reason for having comments is so if you ever go back to the code, you'll know exactly what it's supposed to do, and it might help in debugging the program. The second program I'm going to show you is the use phone book. And again, the description to begin with. And then this one, loops. And as long as phone book add, as long as then person types in a name, then it will skip over this. If they just type in enter, then the length of name will be 0. So therefore it will set off this if, and it will break out of the loop. And in fact, if I wanted to, I could have just had while true here instead of setting loop, because on a previous rendition of this, I did actually set loop to false instead of doing a break, but doing a break is a little bit easier. In fact, then if a name is typed in, then I ask for a number, which is an integer, and then I pass in a name and a number to the phone book, which then adds it to the phone book. And since going back to phone book, if you notice I have a list here, and every time it's added, then as long as this module has been included in either test DB, EDB, or use EB, then it will be remembered. If I want to be remembered for longer than a single use, then I would create a file to add in that information, just like we have done in rock, paper, scissors. So then going through, this takes care of adding to the phone book. Then I go ahead and just say print phonebook.print names, and print names returns a list of names separated by new lines. Then I set up name, and again, it's like the previous one is if I hit just enter by itself, then that means I'm ending this loop, and so I do a break. So if a length of name is greater than 0, I then say number equals phone book find number, pass in a name, and then if name number equals 0, equals zeros, then that means no name was found. Otherwise, I will go ahead and print out the name. And again, this will just do main and come up and execute the main program. Now for the fun part. The reason, well, going back, the reason why I showed you use PB, if you notice, I am keeping the functions that do all the work separate and callable. So therefore, since the phone book has separate functions that are callable, then I can make a test suite for it in Python, which will then call each of the functions. And I need to import unit test, which is a Python module for unit tests. Again, this is for the components of a program. It's not for the highest level testing. We'll get into that later on. But for now, it's just using unit test. And then notice I have here, I have from phone book, and then import, and then a list of the 3 methods or functions that I will be calling, separated by commas. And then this is the way that unit test expects it to be run. So therefore, you have to say from, then the name of the module, then import, and then any particular functions within that module that you want to test. In the testing, we haven't really gone over classes too much, but you can think of a class, in this case, it's a test, and I have the wrong name here. So I'm going to call this test own book. So that is going to be the class name that I'll be using for this class, and probably set up a just a comment saying so. Basically, this is setting up a class to hold all the unit tests for my phone book file. And then I have each of the tests, which is a function. And notice it is test add, and then I can change the names. It has to start off with test add. And notice I have 1, 2, 3, or excuse me, add name, and 4 for add name. And then, excuse me, it just has to start with print. Excuse me, test. And then I have print name, which then tests out the print names. Now, because each time through, it includes in each of the tests, it's like a new include of the phone book file. So therefore, I have to set up the names and numbers. And notice I don't have to put in what this is equal to. All I have to do is put in what I want to have as the parameter. And Python then puts in what the parameter name is for me. These are names that I am not typing in, that Python is typing in for me when it calls add name. Then I go through, I add all these names, and then I print names, and I make sure then the names are Greg, \n, or new line, Gertrude, new line, Fred, new line, George. And then because of the way it's set up, a new line is at the end of George. And so therefore I have to check to make sure that everything matches what I'm actually producing. Then I compare this string to whatever print names produced, which is stored in the variable B. The last test I do, or no, I do 2 more tests, and I'm going to check one. I could call this something else if I wanted. And this basically here, I'll go ahead and I'm going to have here. And this is going to be a test for a name in the list. And here I'm going to have a test for a name not in the list. In the first case, I expect it to return the phone number for Fred, which is 218, which is defined up there. This one, I am trying to find James. So James is not found, so I expect it to return 0. So then all these tests, if I do them correctly, then will work. And then unit test.main is a main file in unit tests, and it then looks for your class, which is based on unit test.test case, and goes through and executes each of the tests defined in that class. So if I run it, then I'll run the class. Notice how it has a run for each of the tests. So I could do a subtest if I wanted to. I could just do a run Python subtest, and notice it ran for 0.004 seconds and passed, so I received an OK. Or I can do all of them by doing the class, and then it runs 7 tests. And everything is to be expected. Let's see. Line and test print. Assert error. Not equal to Gertrude. Oh. Okay. So then, looks like there's a problem with this particular test. So I'm going to put back in the print, and I'm just going to run this one test. And notice then, when I ran it by itself, it worked just fine. But when I ran it as a class, oh, it works fine this time. No. So this is going to be interesting to find out why it is generating this particular sequence. Oh, I know why. It's because it is remembering the previous ones, which didn't remember before. So that's something you're going to have to be careful of, and I'm not going to include a fix for that. But if you notice then, if I just run either one of these by itself, they pass just fine. But unfortunately, then there's some interaction between the two. And so, therefore, I need to make sure that the easiest way to solve this is to add an additional function in Phonebook. And I'm just going to call it pound clear the phone book. So def clear EB. the easiest way to do it is names equals and numbers equals, and then this should do it. And so let's just then add on the test. Then we're going to add one more to this list here. And so now we have a new one. And let's just see if this will work here. Clear BB. And probably should do this on the previous one also. Clear BB. So we're going to try the whole thing out, see what happens. And notice ran 7 tests. Failures 1. Okay. So this is going to take a little bit longer to fix. So you are done with the video, and I am just going to see if I can fix this, but you don't have to stick around for anything more. I've shown you what I consider important. And notice if I just run the test by itself, then it just both runs perfectly fine. And then let's just add, just going to do one thing in here. And this is the one that's failing. Okay, and it passes that way. So then, this is where I needed to clear everything. So let's just try this. And I don't need to have the print here. So I'm going to run this, and notice this test passes just fine. Now if I go back up to run the whole test, failed. Okay. So that clear is not working for that one. And we're just going to go see what happens in this case. And if I ran all the classes together, failed again. Line 38. Oh. Okay, 38. Okay, that should be that. And I'm not adding any other names there. So this is picking up an error nicely. But if I just run it by itself, then no error is found. So it's the interaction between each of them. And then print names. And the only way I can get it to do the error. So if you notice, when I do print names, it's coming up with all those names there. So clear is not working. Okay, apparently there's a limit on how long the meeting can last. Oh. Names and numbers. So let's try this again. Class. And it still is getting an extra repeating. I'm sure you're getting bored by this, so just go ahead and stop. I just have to get this thing fixed. So then clear PB. So anyway, I'll get this fixed. Maybe record again. So I am stopping and stopping recording. Bye.